I'm not the biggest boxing fan in the world. The older I get, I've developed a severe aversion to violence. I don't like, when I was a kid, like, oh yeah, you know, people beating each other's heads in, I was all about it, right? But like now that I'm older, like I don't even like watching a TV show that's even a little bit violent. It bothers me. But when I was younger and Mike Tyson was boxing, I loved it. And I was so excited when Mike Tyson would box. He would just like annihilate people, and I just couldn't get enough of it. I'm like, wow, I've never seen anybody box like this before. But today, for decades actually, I've not been a very good boxing fan, a very big boxing fan. But there's something that happened recently in the world of boxing that has sparked my interest. I'm assuming our congregation here today is not tremendously into boxing, so I'm going to tell you what happened. I'm going to fill you in. There was a boxing match between a heavyweight champion. This man, his name, they call him AJ, okay? Anthony Joshua is his name. And he is a physical specimen, unlike anybody who's been in boxing, at the very least for decades, maybe even ever. This man was undefeated. Nobody could beat him. He's a British boxer, and he decided to come to America because he was the world champion, but if you want to make your name for yourself in boxing, you got to box at Madison Square Garden in New York City. So he came to America, and they got a match. Well, the first guy he was supposed to fight was an American gentleman who failed 3 drug tests for steroids. So weeks before the match was supposed to happen, they had to find a new opponent. They didn't really have very many people to choose from because they didn't know to match up against this guy. And this guy's the best in the world, and they basically got a list of kind of bums here to throw his way because he was going to fight the best person they had, but he failed all the drug tests. So to make a long story short, they found themselves a bum. A bum who wanted to fight really, really bad, even though he had no chance to win. Okay? Now, this bum's name is Andy Ruiz Jr. Okay? I'm going to show you some pictures here to get a visual. The man on your left is Anthony Joshua. The man on your right is Andy Ruiz Jr. Okay? Now, if you'll notice, AJ, as they call him, looks like he was chiseled out of stone. This picture does not do it justice. He's multiple inches taller than Andy. He's got a 12-pack, right? I think Andy's got maybe a 2-pack underneath or behind the chocolate cake in the fridge. I don't know if but there's a big difference there, okay? Now, when they got in the ring on this fateful night, not that long ago, just seeing them two in the ring was almost made you laugh. Okay? Everybody in the world of boxing was there. Every celebrity was there. People flew by the thousands from Britain because he's got such a big following to see this. 99.9% of every person in the audience that night was rooting for AJ, the man chiseled out of stone. Nobody knew who this guy was, and they didn't really think he had a chance. As a matter of fact, one of the quotes from one of the commentators is that basically we're all coming here to watch this match happen for 30 seconds, watch AJ win his first fight in America, and we're all going to move on. And they're probably going to drink a lot of beer at the stadium and sell a lot of booze. That was basically their mentality, right? Well, a funny thing happened. Because this guy who, I'll be honest with you, to me when I saw him, I thought he looks like a mix between Juan Valdez and the Pillsbury Doughboy. Like, that's what he looks like. And they got in the ring, and the fight started off pretty slow, pretty boring. They're testing each other out. It's a 12-round match, trading blows, just trying to feeling each other out. Then in the third round, the heavyweight champion of the world, AJ, Anthony Joshua, got Ruiz in the head with a right hook and knocked him down cold. He was like, what happened? This guy, this champion of the world, he's never been beat before. And he knew what he was doing, and he got him good. He was down for the count. Somehow, this severely out of shape looking man who was multiple inches shorter, had a reach multiple inches shorter, and his punch than this other fighter, got up And that's when the fight began. Starting in that, after he got knocked down in the 3rd round, this guy right here.
That guy got knocked out.
This guy got knocked down. Didn't look like he's going to get back up. Okay? The challenger. He got up, and everything changed. They went toe to toe. And in that same round that Andy got knocked out, Anthony Joshua, the champion of the world, decided to come in close to him because he just wanted to finish this off. And he thought, if I go in there, I'm the champion. I can do this in a second. Well, when he moved in close, within the reach of the shorter man's punch, Andy got him square in the side of the head with a left hook. And you could see Anthony Joshua's knees buckle. He didn't know what was going on around him. He limped through the rest of the fight until he got knocked out in the 7th round. And now, Andy is the first heavyweight champion of the world of Mexican descent, and nobody gave him a chance to win. Now, the reason I tell this story is because it's relevant to our Christian walk. It's relevant to our church. Now, everybody knows who Mike Tyson is, at least, right? Mike Tyson? Yeah. You know, he's a very interesting guy he was heavyweight champion of the world in the 80s and early 90s. He's an interesting guy to hear talk to. He's definitely not a Christian man, and he's not the most eloquent speaker, but he said something that I found fascinating. Talking about this match and talking about the upset that happened in this match, he brought up the Bible. Mike Tyson said, essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase this, that he referred to in the Bible David, who ended up being a powerful king, a powerful warrior king, who had many, many battles his whole life. But Mike Tyson said he's only known for one. And that one battle that David's known for is when he battled Goliath. And he was making a connection between David and Goliath in that biblical narrative and what happened in this fight. And that I was impressed that he referred to the Bible to explain what happened. But I was also impressed as I turned to the Bible to kind of investigate this on my own. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with a very quick couple verses from 1 Samuel talking about David and Goliath. And 1 Samuel 17:32-33, verse 32, it says, this is Saul, King Saul, and David talking. David says, "Don't worry about this Philistine." That's what he said to Saul. "I'll go fight him," obviously referring to Goliath. "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he has been a man of war since his youth." Now, this boxing match that I talked about, somebody who was also talking about that match said something that was seared into my brain when I heard him say it. I think it's brilliant. I think it applies to everything in our walk with God in our lives. Referring to the man who was the underdog, who won this fight against all odds, who didn't look like he should win or even be in the ring with this other guy. He said, "You don't have to look the part to be the part." Referring to Andy. You don't have to look like a statue chiseled out of stone to win at anything in life. You don't have to look a certain way or present yourself or come off in a certain way to be what you're supposed to be and accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish. This applies to the story in David, right? David's saying to King Saul, "Hey, I'll take care of this." He's like, "Are you kidding me? How are you going to do this? You're like a little guy, a little boy. You can't do this. This guy's like only a giant. He's been a man of war his whole life. There's no reason I should believe that you're going to win." But a funny thing happened. David might not look the part, but he didn't have to because he was the part. Now, when Jesus came to earth, when Jesus was born obviously God in the form of a man, he did not look the part, right? I mean, he was nothing to look at from what we understand. He was not powerful in any sense of the word. He was not rich. He had no influence or stature. He was not an official priest or minister at all. He was not in any political or religious office of any sort. He was lowly, humble, and meek. If we turn to the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verse 2, then once again is Isaiah chapter 53, verse 2. This is referring to Jesus in prophecy. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. You don't have to look the part to be the part. The God of all the universe in human form was nothing beautiful or majestic. Nothing that would attract us to him. He didn't look the part, but he was the part. When Jesus was here, not only did he not look the part of God, if you looked at him, oh, look, there's God right there, by his appearance. He probably wore clothes that were just, like I said before, ripped up blue jeans and t-shirt to equate it to nowadays, you know, like probably had some stains on him, probably had holes in his shoes. I'm guessing, I wasn't there, but the guy didn't have much money. I know that much. And not only, if we looked at him then when he was giving his ministry or out in his ministry, would he not look like something beautiful, majestic, like an Adonis chiseled out of stone, but at the time of his death, boy, did he not look the part of somebody who was king of the world, who was going to save us from our sins. If you turn to Matthew chapter 26, verse 67. Matthew chapter 26, verse 67. It says, "Then they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists, and some slapped him." This is God, the most powerful being in the universe. And that's the most powerful being there is. People were spitting in his face and beating with their fists. He did nothing. Matthew chapter 27, verse 30. It's very close. Matthew chapter 27, verse 30. "And they spit on him and grabbed a stick and struck him on the head with it." Could you imagine how humiliating that would be? You know, the thing about boxing is it's the one sport where you get utter humiliation. You get complete dominance, because if you lose the match, more than likely what happened is you're on your back and you got dominated and beat down till your body couldn't take it anymore, and the guy's standing over you and everybody's watching. This is worse, what Jesus went through, than losing a match like that. He didn't look the part, but he was the part. John chapter 19, verse 3. John chapter 19, verse 3. "Hail the King of the Jews," they mocked, as they slapped him across the face. Literally the most powerful being that ever lived, or ever will live, ever will be. They mocked him. Like, you're king, right? Yeah, King of the Jews. They weren't being serious. They were mocking him. They were humiliating him. And imagine as a human being how you would feel in that moment, wanting to prove something, but he didn't prove anything. He showed real strength. He showed that he really was the part by being humble, even to the point of pain, suffering, and humiliation for our benefit. Now, when people look at our church, you know, they'll see a small group, a small family of people. They'll see a group of people who don't necessarily come to church in a suit and tie, right? We're pretty casual. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but you know, usually we don't do that. They'll see a group of people who have Bible studies that are kind of loose and free-spirited, free-flowing, and they're not real rigorous and stiff and regimented, you know. They'll see a group of people who come from varied backgrounds and are at various junctures in our lives, and I think we all recognize that. If people were to come into our small group, they'd see a group of people that some might say take too much time praying during church service, right? I think I've heard that one before, actually. A group of people who do church a bit differently than how we're supposed to, supposedly. Average, everyday people who are not self-righteous or pretentious. They'll see a group of people who don't look the part of what we are told church is supposed to look like. But honestly, if we did look the part, I'd be scared. I'd be a little bit nervous. I've seen a lot of people and churches and places that look the part, just like AJ, Anthony Joshua, he looked the part. But that's not the reality of the situation. He wasn't the part. If you think about the biblical narrative, the story of Jesus' life when he was on earth, the 12 disciples that followed Jesus did not look the part. Right? There was nothing special at all about these 12 disciples. Nothing. They were lowly people who, according to the powers that be, should have not been chosen by God to change the world. But these 12 average and below average men, depending on your perspective, did just that. They went to every nation and tribe and spread the good news and changed the world more so than any other men, aside from Jesus himself, in the entire of the history of the world ever did. You know, earlier in Bible study, Vi asked me what BC meant. And I told her it meant before Christ. I mean, what a link to how impactful what those 12 disciples did when they went out, these average Joes, spreading the message of Jesus, and now we base our time based on the coming of Jesus and his death, BC and AD. I mean, that's amazing in itself. A bunch of rich dudes didn't pay to have this happen. A bunch of influential ministers and priests didn't do it. 12 guys who were fishermen or other ragged bunch of guys just followed Jesus' call, and they changed the world. God does not pick the strongest looking, the most attractive, necessarily the most educated, the most perfect people to do his work. No, he picks special people who know their weakness, know their faults, who are humble and willing to listen to God's call no matter where it takes them. I think that's us. I think that's our group. I think that's our family. Our church might not do church like we're told to do church sometimes by other people. Our church might not look the part, but we are the part. According to some people, our church might not have the right name. According to some, our church might not have the right approval of groups of organizations or whatever it may be. To those, we don't look the part, just like Jesus did not look the part to the Pharisees. We don't follow the lead of men or organizations. The disciples didn't. They followed the lead of Jesus. That's it. Just like Jesus, we follow the lead of God and God alone. For people who live in darkness, we don't look the part because of that reason. Because as we're talking about in Bible study, how in our society fasting, you know, we talk a lot about fasting in our Bible study. Fasting's so foreign and strange to our society, but it's not strange and foreign to God. And for us to follow God instead of man may seem foreign to most people, but it's not to God. Our church is David going up against many Goliaths. You know, there's that famous quote, and I'm going to probably mess it up, where it's something I do with the politician, but the rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated. You know, essentially saying everybody said I was beat, I was down, I was done, but they obviously know what I was talking about. But not only have we gone up against every Goliath at every juncture, whether it be spiritual, whether it be in a meeting place, whether it be financial, whether it be political, whether it be people coming against our little group, trying to cause a ruckus. Every Goliath our little group has faced, we've gotten through it. But not only are we succeeding now, and not only are we winning this round, we're going to win the next round, and the next round after that, etc. We may be the ultimate underdog, right? Just like Andy was the ultimate underdog in the ring. God is going to use this little church to do even greater things in the future. God is going to use this church to change Queen Creek, to change the East Valley. And if you don't believe it because God can help us change the state of Arizona for the better. Bring people to Him, love people. You don't believe it. If you don't, well, God can do even greater things. He can help us change the country. And I know that's hard to believe, right? But is it hard to believe that 12 disciples who were running for their lives and had no influence, no money, no power, changed the entire world unlike any other human beings on the planet just by following Jesus, just by doing what Jesus said to do? We can change the country, we can change the world. The disciples did it. So many people that followed God throughout the history of the Bible, they did it too, not just the disciples. If we let God lead us, direct us, if we humble ourselves and align ourselves with God and God alone, He will use us like He used David, the 12 disciples, Esther, Mary, the mother of Jesus, John the Baptist, and Jesus Himself to do the things that nobody would have guessed we were capable of doing. You know, at the State of the Union address every year, or they have it, right? January, and the president always says, the State of the Union is strong. Well, the state of our church is strong. And the reason it's strong is because we have God in the center of it. And we have a group of people, that can make a difference. And if we let God and not man direct us, if we act as servants of God instead of playing some sort of churchy game, which happens a lot in churches, I think we've all experienced that. Some of these churchy games get people to try to look the part for the approval of men, but that's a fruitless endeavor because it doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter what I think or any person thinks. It only matters what God thinks. And last time I checked, God didn't zero in on who's the most powerful, who's the most well-dressed, who's the most well-educated, who's the most qualified. He went to people who knew weren't perfect. And they often question, be like, God, why are you picking me? What do I have to offer? And God would time and time again tell them exactly what they have to offer, whether they believed Him or not. And that's who He used, and that's who worked for Him. If we keep our eyes on God, He will help us do amazing things for Him. I have no doubt this is what's happening now and will continue to happen in the future. This little church, just like that little man, is going to do something special. Something that no man would have ever expected, much like when Andy Ruiz Jr. knocked out Anthony Joshua to become, like I said, the first heavyweight champion of Mexican descent in the history of the sport. According to men, and I'm quoting this, according to men, he was too fat, too short, underskilled, and outmatched. And now he is the heavyweight champion of the world. I want to close with a verse that I think puts in perspective what this means for us spiritually and what this means for us as a church. It's found in Romans chapter 8, verse 11. Once again, that verse is Romans chapter 8, verse 11. Okay, Romans chapter 8, verse 11 says, "The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. And just as God raised Christ Jesus from the dead, He will give life to your mortal bodies by the same Spirit living within you." So when I say that we can change our town for the better, we can make a change in our state, in our country, and when I say something that sounds so far-fetched that we can make changes around the world, remember this verse. Because if you don't believe me, believe God. And let me tell you right now that the same Spirit of God who raised Jesus from a humiliating, ridiculous death that He should have never had to pay, that same Spirit will give life to our mortal bodies. That same Spirit will live within you, us. So it's not far-fetched. Just like it wasn't far-fetched, the people who said that Andy couldn't win, but he won. And with our church, we just got to understand that no matter what Goliath comes along, that Spirit of God is within us.